Hello everyone, welcome to yet another video from Dive Talk. My name is Gus.
Hi everybody, it's Woody.
And today we're going to be kind of revisiting one of the videos that we did in the past. It was the David Shaw video. Yes. Where we reacted basically to a video where he attempted the rescue of a deceased diver.
Did I do that? I think I did that one.
Yep, alone. Woody did this one alone, and it was before we had the means to do this dual react, so we had to kind of pick and choose who would do what.
Yep.
If you read through the comments of this video, there's a ton of feedback about things we got wrong. And granted, as you know, if you follow this channel, if you watch some of the videos, you know that I'm a big fan of showing Woody things for the first time ever and have him kind of react on the fly. And that's exactly what happened with the David Shaw video. I set him up with the video, I hit play, and obviously he didn't have all of the facts from it, which were then pointed out to us on the comments. People are like, it didn't happen the next day. What are you talking about? He had a team, like facts like that. So Woody wanted to come on board and kind of talk about all of the facts, because I think that if you read the facts, the story's even better.
This is amazing. All right, so I'm going to spend a lot of time reading. And if for those of you that find this interesting, there's an article out there called Raising the Dead that really lays it out. But I think it's very important, frankly, out of respect to David Shaw, to get these facts right. So I want to apologize. I absolutely did no back research when I did the first one and simply reacted. But here we go. Let me tell you what set the story up. On October 28th of 2004, Shaw, listen to this, he broke the following records. This was at Bushman's Hole in South Africa. The deepest depth on a rebreather, the deepest depth in a cave on a rebreather, the deepest depth at altitude on a rebreather, and the deepest depth running a line. He was on a Jurgensen Marine Hammerhead Electronics. He had various different gas mixtures, 480, 1070, etc., etc. I'm not going to go through all the gas mixtures, but he had extensive mixtures to be able to deal with very deep depths. By the way, this cave was at 5,090 feet. The dive on October 28th that sets the story up was 9 hours and 40 minutes. Now, on this dive, which was a record-breaking dive, Shaw discovered the body of Dion Dreyer. That's a South African diver. He died in Bushman's Holes 10 years previously. The body was at 890 feet underwater.
Bananas.
Okay, so that sets the story up. Really clear set of facts there.
So he does the dive successfully, sets the record.
And in that dive, they knew that the body was still down there somewhere, but he wasn't on the dive to look for the body.
Right.
But he happened to see it. That was on October 28th, 2004. Okay? All right. Because this is mind-boggling. Now, listen to this. Every single minute he spent on the bottom, his dive computer said he was now adding more than an hour of decompression time on the way up.
For every minute?
So I want you to be clear. This is a very important set of facts that I did not discuss. 1 minute is 1 hour of deco.
What?
So when they say that every minute counts, as you'll hear this story unfold, now you know why.
Hold on, but let me stop you right there for a second, because I think people might think that my outrage is like fake. But when you think about like the Mount Everest of cave diving, Eagle's Nest, which is one of the deepest cave that you can dive in, right? Super deep, 300 plus feet. One of the intimidating factors of that cave is that for every minute you spend down there, you're adding about 5 minutes of deco. Maybe up to 10 minutes of deco, depending on where your PO2 is. So if you spend 5 minutes at that depth, you have 50 minutes or whatever to spend. This guy is adding 1 hour for every minute. That's insane.
He's at 886 feet of depth.
Wow.
Okay. Now this is important. So let me tell you what happened again. I'm reading a lot. I want to get this right. What happened is he stopped about 50 feet to the left, perfectly illuminated, because it's really clear water down there. That's what he described. That's what was described, was the body. It was on its back. The arms were reaching up towards the surface. This is the exact position. Shaw knew immediately. That was Dion Dreyer, a 20-year-old South African who had blacked out deep in Bushman's 10 years earlier and disappeared. And divers had been keeping an eye out for him for a long time.
See if they can spot him.
Okay, now listen. Shaw, up close, he could see that this is all really important. He could see that Dion's tanks and dive harness, snugged around a black and tan wetsuit, was all intact. Dion's head and hands were exposed to the water, so those were skeletonized bones, okay? But his mask was eerily in place on the skull. Thinking he should try to bring Dion back to the surface, Shaw wrapped his arms around the corpse and tried to lift him, and it didn't move. All right? So,
and I wonder if he thought he was hallucinating at that depth.
Well, he was struggling with being narked. They talk about that. Shaw quickly tied the cave reel, good thinking, to Dion's tank so the body could be found again and returned to the shot line to start his ascent. I left out some other things about what was going through his mind to then say, I cannot do this now. Remember, 1 hour of deco for every 1 minute. No planned mission at this point, right? This is just, I just found the body. You got no time to figure out, can I do this?
That wasn't part of his plan.
So, he's approaching 400 feet. Almost an hour into the dive, Shaw met up with his close friend, Don Shirley, a very important person in this story. He's 48-year-old British expat, runs a tech dive school there in South Africa. And after Shirley checked that Shaw was okay and retrieved some spare gas cylinders, obviously, for him, Shaw showed him an underwater slate on which he had written 270 meters found body. Shirley's eyebrows shot up inside his mask and he reached out to shake his friend's hand. He knew, of course, who that was.
Yeah.
So Shirley left Shaw because Shaw had another 8 hours and 40 minutes of deco time at that point. So we're not joking about the time frame here. Dave, this is a quote from Shirley. Some of these, I'm skipping lots of parts, but I'm giving you the highlights. Dave felt very connected with Dion, Shirley says. He had found him, so it was like a personal thing that he should bring him back.
Yep.
Which is what's going to get into the real meat of the story now. When Shaw finally surfaced in the late afternoon, he removed his mask and said, I want to try to take him out. Okay. So now we know there's going to be another dive. So the question is, when, how, logistics, and so forth. By the way, it goes on to say no one knows for sure what killed Dion. The best guess is deep water blackout from carbon dioxide buildup. We've talked about that a lot, so that's the speculation. Just in case I said something wrong on that video, I may have on that. Yeah. That's what they think. They don't know for sure. All right.
And that's one thing that I think is something to be commended, which is he came out and instead of celebrating like, I broke the record, whatever, and like keep it to himself, the first thing was, I need to go back and get this guy.
So very good point, because listen to this. 2 days later, I want to get dates straight.
Yes. On
October 30th, 2004, 2 days later, Dave Shaw called Theo and said, I will go and fetch your son. Theo's the dad. Theo, the dad, immediately responded, yes, absolutely, yes. More than anything, he realized he wanted to see his boy again. Okay, so if recovering Dion from the bottom of Bushman's Hole was a feat of extraordinary ambition and danger, combining extreme depth with demanding work, Shaw and Shirley were just the guys to pull it off. Why did I read that line? These two guys had been diving together, technical diving, for a good long while, many, many hours underwater, and it took amazing amount of planning. So before, when I said no, he went back the next day and he was alone.
Yeah.
Everything about that is wrong.
Absolutely.
Wait till you hear the planning. To his respect, that needs to be discussed in detail. All right. In the fall of 2002, so this is when Shirley met Shaw. Hi, I'm Dave Shaw, the man said. Do you mind if I go dive your hole? Shirley sized up the buff Aussie and liked what he saw. Soon Shaw was flying in regularly to dive, and Shirley went with him whenever he had time. So Shaw and Shirley had logged more than 100 hours underwater together. In nearly 2.5 years, they'd known each other. That's a lot of hours together
For
underwater.
sure.
So you know your teammate, right? That's important.
You trust him.
So Shirley introduced Shaw to the enticing depths of Bushman's in June of 2004. Shaw turned up with this rebreather, set a record at that point at 725 feet. He had a DUI dry suit. It's interesting. It was a Thinsulate underwater dry suit, and so forth and so on. It talks about he had a pee valve so he could pee regularly. And
if you're going to spend
during
10
his
hours.
deco, it was interesting that he would intermittently pull his regulator out. He would have candy bars, and he would drink water and so forth. So that was going in place. In November of 2004, back home in Hong Kong, Shaw was in almost daily email and phone conversation with Shirley. So this is their next month, back and forth, planning, talking. How are we going to do this? The big dive, that's what they named the recovery dive, was set for early January, and one of the most elusive questions was the condition of Dion's body. Because remember, Shaw said, man, this body, guys, I couldn't even really move it. So we got to think about that. How are we going to deal with the body? So the forensics experts they consulted weren't sure, but guessed the corpse would be mostly bone. Shaw decided he better try to get it into a body bag for the trip to the surface or risk having the body fall apart. That's why the body bag was brought. Together with Ann, another assistant planning this, he designed a silk bag with drawstrings long enough to fit over Dion's fins. Here we go. The big dive was on January 8th, a Saturday. Okay, so October discovered, January 8th is the big dive.
Almost 3 months later.
So on that evening, January 1st, Ann made the 45-minute drive to Hong Kong. It talks about with 250 pounds of dive gear in her car. She's his wife, Ann's Shaw's wife.
Yeah.
Shaw had been flying that day because he was a pilot.
Right.
And met at the Cathay Pacific offices and drove him to the departure area. They sat together. And he says to her, "You're not crying, are you?" he asked. This is kind of like a premonition. No, Ann replied bravely. Shaw got up to leave for his flight. He didn't say, "I love you." He didn't need to. She knew. Well, Shaw arrived 6 days before the dive, and they were practicing. They went over to Kamadi Springs, so tons of practice.
Yeah.
He practiced getting a body into the bag underwater with Shirley, playing the part of Dion's corpse. At 66 feet, went smooth. Shirley played limp, played dead, and it worked. It only took him a couple of minutes to get Shirley into the bag when they were practicing. A day later, he and Shirley drove to Mount Carmel, where 7 South African rebreather divers, handpicked by Shirley the coming Saturday, January 8th, and handpicked by Shirley and a police team from Cape Town and Pretoria, because there was a dead body involved, were assembling. So big team now, handpicked by Shirley. The dive would go off on the coming Saturday, January 8th, and Shirley's dive plan was like an underwater symphony. Every single detail, in fact, was planned out. He was far from being alone, far from just winging it the next day.
Yeah, he didn't just strap a rebreather and go down to get him next day. Right?
Wait till you hear the plans.
Yeah.
Shaw was looking at a dive that would last 12 hours. Okay, and they're going to hit the water at 6 a.m. All the other divers, this is important, are going to key off Shaw's dive time and head for specific target depths, either to help look after Shaw or pass Dion's body to the surface. So the plan was never for Shaw, obviously, to bring the body all the way up to the surface. There were many divers involved at various depths. The first diver Shaw would meet on the way up, of course, was Shirley. Shirley would be at 725 feet. So it is true, I do want to highlight this, it is true that at the maximum depth, Shaw was alone. Significantly deeper than 725 feet.
Well, because, I mean, nobody has been to that depth.
And that's what they said. You know what? Too much risk.
Yeah.
So he would hand the body bag over, and if things went well, Dion would be out of the water about 80 minutes after Shaw's dive had started, because they can keep passing the body up to divers that don't have that deco obligation. Very smart plan.
Right.
Shirley had done everything in his power to minimize the risk. This is coming up with the planning. I like this part. He planned to have 35 backup cylinders of gas in the water, enough so that he, Shaw, and even some support divers could survive total rebreather failure. So they planned for a total rebreather failure.
Which is smart.
He arranged for a rope and a sling system to be set up that could haul a diver on a stretcher up the cliffs of the hole to a recompression chamber. So even that was planned. That they trucked in. The police actually brought a recompression chamber to the site. Tons of planning here. Tons of logistics were set up for this dive.
Yep.
Tons. To cope with any medical emergencies, Shirley had a doctor, whatever, I can't even pronounce his name, a specialist in diving physiology at the University of Stettenbach outside Cape Town. But this doctor, when he realized that up to 9 divers would be in the water and learned the depth they would be going to, he almost backed out. He almost backed out. He said there were too many potential bodies. You were dealing with multiple divers going deep, and that's serious. That's a quote. All right, skipping some stuff, moving forward. Shaw did have one big wrinkle to work out. This is an important point. He partnered up with a South African documentary filmmaker, Gordon Hiles, to chronicle this recovery. So Hiles designed an underwater camera housing to be lightweight, low light, works in low light. It was a Sony HC20 Handycam, and attached it to a Petzl climbing helmet. For those of you that climb, that's a climbing helmet we use. Things can attach to it. Shaw was not used to wearing a helmet. He liked to carry a high-intensity light on the back of his hand, and if he needed both hands underwater, Shaw would normally sling the light and cable around his neck so it wouldn't snag on anything. The helmet cam would make that hard to do. So now this is something that Shaw's not used to. Right? This is not how he normally dives. Shaw tried the device in the swimming pool at Mount Carmel and decided he's comfortable with the design and weight. He told Hiles that instead of slinging his light around his neck, he would occasionally set it to the side. He wasn't going to be able to sling it because of the helmet and the camera and so forth, apparently.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 days before the dive, Shaw carried the camera on an acclimatization dive to 500 feet. So he's acclimating because this is at altitude.
Pretty deep, yeah.
And he's diving at altitude. He's climbing in high altitude. So they have to acclimate as well. Not just deep, but altitude. Unbelievable. Okay, came out perfect. Very successful. He was impressed with the gear. And then Shaw said, I'm sure you'll be impressed with my video footage as well. Which is kind of eerie because we know what the video footage showed.
Yeah.
So they had one big last briefing on Friday and went over some final points. The most important person on this dive is you. This is what Shaw said. If you have a problem, Shaw said, deal with your problem and forget about me. Everybody was told that on the team. It's better to have one person dead than 2. He had a separate private conversation, though, with Shirley, who had upgraded his rebreather for the dive with an oil-filled hammerhead controller. This is also really important. Remember that. So he could get all the way to the bottom of Bushman's if he had to. You want the controller to break under pressure.
Right.
Shirley had asked his friend, if you have problems, man, do you want me to come down? I know what you told everybody else. Shaw considered it. Yes, but only if I signal you to come down. Because remember, he was going to remain a good 100 and something feet above him.
Right.
Okay. Shirley and Shaw had one last message for the gathered team. If Dave doesn't make it, if I don't make it, we stay there. That's what Shirley now told the rest of the team. That's the end of the story. We don't want to be recovered. Nobody else try this recovery. We stay there. The team knows not to come.
Wow.
All right. Time to go, guys. January 8th. It's time for the big dive. Okay? And Shirley didn't sleep that night. Shirley says, look, you know, I didn't sleep. I just been thinking it through. So now here's when it already starts to get scary. The previous evening, as he was charging the battery on his new Hammerhead controller, a wire snapped. This is Shirley. Without the unit, he would not be able to make the dive. Shirley was devastated. Shaw felt deeply for his friend, but was prepared to proceed without him. He put Shirley and Peter Herbst in touch with Jurgensen Marine, who manufactured that Hammerhead at 9 p.m., the cutoff time he had set for himself. Shaw went to bed with the help of Jurgensen, a soldering iron, and some tin foil. Herbst managed to jury rig a fix. The Hammerhead powered up. Man, Shirley was on the dive again. So
Jerry rig something that you need for 700 plus feet.
For Shirley's.
That's bananas.
So let's see how that worked out. In the gray pre-dawn, Shaw and Shirley began the 10-minute drive to the hole. They were relaxing. 6:13 a.m., video cameras on. Shaw took Shirley's hand, said, I'll see you in 20 minutes, and ducked into the dark waters of Bushman's Hole because he was going to be able to get back to the 725 feet quickly to be able to see him again. A few minutes later, Theo and Marie Dreyer made their way to the water's edge. That's the parents. They had come to see that Shaw would. So they came after. They didn't want Shaw to feel pressured to get the body. They didn't want to be standing there when he started the dive.
Right.
Like, man, you got to do this no matter what. They were respectful.
Yeah, we count on you, kind of thing.
So they didn't do that. They came after he was already submerged.
Well, that was another thing that people say, like, why were they there to begin with?
That's why.
Yeah.
Oh, well, just to set a record. The first dive was just to set a rebreathing.
No, I know, but why did they tell the parents, hey, be there when your son comes out? Like, just come later.
They wanted to.
Yeah.
He hit the bottom in just over 11 minutes. He got to that depth really fast, and it was a minute and a half faster than he planned. And remember, every minute matters. That's an hour of deco time he just carved off because of that. So he immediately started swimming along the cave line. As soon as the corpse loomed ahead, he pulled out the body bag. Then he knelt alongside Dion and went to work. He almost certainly could feel the narc kicking in. The helium and reduced nitrogen of his trimix would have limited the effect, but it was probably still as if he had drowned 4 or 5 martinis. Downed, excuse me. He had been on the bottom of Bushman's Hole at 886 feet for just over 1 minute. 13 minutes after he submerged, Shirley got the go signal and dropped towards the rendezvous point, was shot 725 feet.
Yeah.
And now Shirley starts down. Approaching 500 feet, imagine Shirley's looking down because it was super clear, and he could see Shaw's light almost 400 feet below him. It was about where he expected it, near the shot line, the line that they were going to use to come back up. There was only one problem. The light wasn't moving. Shirley knew instantly that something had gone wrong. By that time, more than 20 minutes into his dive, Shaw should have been ascending. I mean, remember I told you what every minute does. 20 minutes down there, now that's 20 hours of deco, if he was even alive. Shirley should have seen bubbles burbling as Shaw vented the expanding gas in the rebreather in the dry suit. You know how we have to bubble, right? It's expanding. We got to get rid of the gas.
Yep.
From our there was
counter
no movement, no bubbles, nothing but a lonely still light. Okay, we're approaching the end because we're not out of the woods yet for Shirley. Shirley stayed calm, his actions becoming almost automatic. A motionless diver at 886 feet is almost certainly a dead diver, But it was Dave Shaw down there. Shirley had to see if there was anything he could do, or at least clip Shaw to the shot line so his body could be recovered.
Yeah.
So, okay, here I go, he said to himself. At about 800 feet, deeper than Shirley had ever been, Shirley heard, remember he filled it with oil so that wouldn't happen?
It happened.
So, an enormous pressure crushing something, then a thud, and he looked down and the hammerhead controller on his left arm was a wreck. And so Shirley said without it, Shirley would have to constantly monitor the oxygen levels, rebreather, and inject oxygen into his breathing loop manually. It was a full-time occupation, emergency routine at life-threatening depths. Shirley was certain that if he went down to Shaw, he would join him for eternity. He got his rebreather back under control, and he had to start back up the line. Flipping through the alternate decompression profiles on a slate, he was facing at least another 10 hours in the water, and after a few minutes, Shaw's light was swallowed by the darkness below him. No longer could see light. Of course, he's too high at that point. So coming near the end, back on the surface, the crowd around the hole had no idea what was going on beneath them. 29 minutes after Shaw had gone under, and about 6 minutes after Shirley had seen that his light was not moving, support divers started their dive to the rendezvous with Shaw at 492 feet. That's where support divers, were going to be meeting. As they closed on their target depth, they realized there were no lights coming up and no sign of Shirley either. So now they're like, whoa. Their plan called for them, though, to wait 2 to 4 minutes. They stayed for 6, and it was time to go. Remember, they were told, do not be a hero and dive your plan. And they did.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow.
So before they started up, they peered one more time into the void. This time they could see a light, but they couldn't tell who it was. Andrews took out an underwater slate and wrote, did not meet D plus D at 150 meters for 6 minutes. One light below, question mark. Not sure, D's light off. On the way up, they passed other divers that were there. Another support team who were on their way down. They showed each the slate and continued now ascending. They knew that there was no point in continuing to have all those divers descend more. Just past 400 feet, Herbst pulled even. It was Shirley. And sorry, Dave, Herbst silently apologized. Now, this is why it was named, the movie was named this. Big point here. Herbst silently apologized. He flashed Shirley the okay sign and got one back. Then Shirley asked Herbst for a slate. He scribbled on it for a second and returned it. It read, Dave not coming back. Okay. Getting to the end. For the Dryers, it had been the parents. I'm skipping near to the end. It had been a terrible half an hour. A day that had started out promising the recovery of their son's body was now going to end with Shaw and Dion both at the bottom of Bushman's Hole. The Dryers backed away from the water, helpless to do anything, made their way to the farmhouse. Marie was in agony, crying and thinking about Shaw's wife and family. She wandered into Shaw's room and saw his shoes, wallet, cell phone, and clothes all neatly laid out. It's like he's coming back soon to use it all again, Marie thought. But she knew he wasn't.
Wow.
Anyways, what ended up happening was that Shirley was alone down there. He had to continue his retreat and then ultimately was able to get out. Shirley, though, had this complication. This was left out of the document. Listen to this. This is mind-boggling what Shirley had to deal with. Shirley didn't know it yet, but a small bubble of helium had formed in his left inner ear, causing extreme vertigo. So now Shirley felt like he was in a washing machine and off the line. In the dark, all he could do was see with his light as he spun was black, followed by the flash of the cave roof, then black. He saw a flash of white go by, and then again, it was the shot line. And without thinking, he thrust his hand onto the line to grab it. That grabbed is what kept him alive. If he missed it, would have drifted off and been lost, and up or down wouldn't have mattered. Depth or the bends would have finished him, and they would have been recovering him as well. It finally slowed the washing machine feeling so that he could finally read his computer again. It showed that he'd come up to 114 feet. He was vomiting from vertigo. He knew he had to get back down to 151 feet to finish some more off-gassing, some more deco. And he was writing on his slate to other divers that now got there. I'm having a bad time. I've got vertigo. I'm vomiting. And so forth and so on. Awful. But he kept telling himself, he wrote, each breath was a conscious act. I have to think about breathing. And those got harder and harder. So got to be careful about a CO2 buildup. So he would go, I have to suck in, hold, exhale. Suck, hold, and exhale. Now that seems so normal, Gus, to us. But he had to think to do that. And he kept saying, I will survive. I will survive. Like his brain told him that, and that he writes later that mental exercise kept him alive. So I'm not finishing on the story. I'm ending it here. He did get out. Obviously, he told the story, so he got out.
But he had that problem for months, right?
Months of recovering. So far from what I said on the first one, I'm going to conclude here. I wanted to give the respect to Shirley, to Shaw, to all the team members of how much planning went into this. I didn't get into this discussion about, well, what do they think happened? What did they see on the GoPro video that caused the complication for Shaw? He was down there at 800, almost 890 feet, working, couldn't get the body in, if you remember, and ultimately passed out. Yeah. Right? Too much exertion. That's on the first one. That part's not wrong. But the planning and what went into it was really important to give them this respect. And I hope this now helps clarify the real story, because it's actually even more amazing than when I did the initial react. As you know, and Gus, I appreciate you saying that. I had no back preparation. Gus was like, I want you to react to this.
Just watch and talk.
And I think you may have even said, Woody, I think it's the next day they went back and recovered the body.
Right.
We just somehow wrongly concluded that. That's wrong. They had months of preparation.
Yeah, we talked about it like it wasn't on the record dive. It was just another day they went back, maybe the next day. Or it was
But it doesn't matter, because now
we got a ton of stuff wrong. And I also I know you want to do this too. I also see the tons and tons of comments that people made about like, well, why were they so stupid? Why not just tie a rope and pull him up? Now, learning the facts, you understand that it was a skeleton. You can just pull him and it will fall apart.
That's why. That's why he made a bag. He was like, I want to bring up all the remains. That's right. They consulted. The body is probably going to fall apart.
Which is true, because at some point, even on the video, you can see the head comes detached.
Yes.
From the body. So you can only imagine if they tie a rope to like the waist or something and pull it, it would have just disintegrated.
There's no point in the mission and all that. But anyway, that's it. It is remarkable. The whole thing is remarkable.
Yeah.
And Shaw was a really good soul. He knew he was the last person to see that body, and he wanted to bring that body back for those parents. And that's knowing he was going to risk his life. And how do I know he knew he was going to risk his life? Many times you heard me say he told the others, do not come after me.
I know there's a chance that this will happen.
I know I'm going to risk my life. Only Shirley did he say, you can come after me if I flag you, if my light is waving or something like that, because Shirley was going to have to look down 150 or so feet, because he was always planning on being that far above him. So I hope that helps everybody. I'm sorry for misstating the facts the first time. I really am. I'm glad I did the reaction, though, because now I feel like it's a real tribute both to Shaw and Shirley, actually.
Yeah, so. Absolute legends. They didn't do this for money. No. Like, at no point you learn it. It's like, well, they were hoping to collect the $50,000 bounty on the body. No, like, it was all about bringing the body back.
That's right.
Yeah, they made the ultimate sacrifice. So
thank you, everybody. And until the next one, we appreciate you tuning into this one.
See you then.